I am an old man now. My hair is white, my hands are weak, and my back is bent from the weight of the years. But my heart remembers everything. It remembers the pain, the loneliness, the hunger, and the cold. It remembers the streets, the people who passed me by, and those rare, kind souls who gave me hope. When I was a little boy, life was very hard. I had no family. My parents died when I was 5 years old, and with them, my world disappeared. I had no brothers, no sisters, no one to hold my hand and tell me everything would be all right. I was alone. The world was vast and unkind, and I was just a small, forgotten part of it. Every morning, I woke up hungry. My stomach ached from emptiness, and I had no one to prepare me food. My clothes were old, torn, and barely covered me. My shoes had holes so big that in the summer, the hot ground burned my feet, and in the winter, my toes went numb from the biting cold. I did not go to school. I wanted to learn, but that was a dream for other children, not for me. I had to work. I had to survive. I sold newspapers, candies, anything that people would buy. Some people gave me a few coins, others ignored me and walked away as if I were invisible. I spent my days on the streets, surrounded by noise and movement, yet always feeling utterly alone. Nobody stopped to ask, "How are you?" or "Do you need help?" No one looked into my eyes and saw a child in need. At night, when the city grew quiet, the loneliness became unbearable. I often found a dark corner to sit in, hugging my knees to my chest, trying to keep warm. I would stare up at the sky, watching the stars, wondering if they could see me. Did they know how cold and hungry I was? Did they care? One winter night, the cold was unbearable. I had no home to go to, no walls to shield me from the icy wind. I found a small corner near a shop and curled up there, trying to fight the shivers that racked my body. My stomach ached with hunger. My hands were red and trembling from the freezing air. I wanted to cry, but I had long learned that tears did nothing to ease my pain. As I sat there, an old woman with kind eyes and gray hair walked past me. She stopped and looked at me for a long moment before reaching into her bag and pulling out a piece of bread. "Eat, child," she said softly. "You need this more than I do." I took the bread with shaking hands and whispered, "Thank you." It was the best thing I had tasted in weeks. That small act of kindness stayed with me for years, a tiny flame of warmth in the freezing world I lived in. I was not always alone. One day, I found a stray dog, small and thin like me. He had no one, just like I had no one. I named him Buddy. He followed me everywhere, his tail wagging whenever I spoke to him. He was my only friend, the only soul in the world who cared if I lived or died. At night, we curled up together, sharing what little warmth we had. If I found food, I shared it with him. If he found scraps, he brought them to me. We needed each other. One day, as I searched through the trash for anything useful, I found a broken toy car. It was small, missing a wheel, but I picked it up and cleaned it off. That little car became my treasure. When I felt hopeless, I would hold it in my hands and imagine myself driving far away to a place where I was warm, where I had a family, where I was loved. Mornings were the hardest. I woke up early and went to the market, hoping to earn a few coins by carrying heavy bags for people. Some were kind and gave me something, others just walked past, barely noticing me. I saved every coin I could, hoping one day I could buy a warm coat or shoes without holes. But no matter how hard I worked, life never got easier. The hunger, the cold, and the loneliness never left me. One rainy evening, I sat under a small roof near the market, soaked and shivering. Buddy lay next to me, his fur wet, his body trembling. I held him close, trying to keep us both warm. As I sat there, I saw a little boy in a bright red coat walking with his mother. He held her hand and laughed, a sound so pure, so full of happiness that it hurt to hear it. I remembered my own mother's laughter, the way she used to hold me close and tell me stories, but those days were gone. She was gone. One day, a shopkeeper caught me staring at the food in his window. I wasn't stealing, only looking, but he shouted at me, "Go away, boy! You can't afford anything here!" His words stung, but I walked away, silently. I was used to being treated like that. People saw me as a nuisance, a problem they didn't want to deal with. At night, I often looked up at the stars, whispering my dreams to them. "Please," I would say, "give me a chance." But the stars never answered. One morning, I found an old, torn blanket in the trash. It smelled bad, but it was better than nothing. I wrapped it around me, feeling a small measure of comfort. Even though life was unbearably hard, I tried to stay strong. I told myself, one day things will change. Then, one freezing winter night, everything changed. I sat by the side of the road, snow falling all around me, my hands red, my feet numb. Buddy lay curled up beside me, shivering. People walked past, wrapped in warm coats and scarves, but no, one stopped. I had nothing left, not food, not hope. Just as I thought I could not endure another moment, I heard footsteps stop in front of me. A man in a black coat knelt down. He had a kind face and sad eyes. He held out a piece of bread. "Here, eat this," he said softly. I looked at him, my heart pounding. No one had looked at me like that in a long time, with kindness, with care. That moment changed my life. I am an old man now. My hair is white, my hands are weak, but my heart remembers. I was that lonely boy, forgotten and unseen. But I survived. And now, whenever I see a child alone in the streets, I stop. I kneel, and I offer them hope, just as someone once offered it to me. "Bread. Eat," he said. Softly, I took the bread with shaky hands. My fingers trembled as I held it, my stomach twisting with hunger, my throat dry from thirst. the simple piece of bread felt heavier than it should have, not because of its weight, but because of what it meant. It was kindness, something I had not known in a long time. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice hoarse and uncertain. It had been so long since I had spoken words of gratitude to anyone. The man simply nodded, saying nothing more. He sat beside me on the cold pavement, his presence quiet and steady. He didn't ask questions. He didn't tell me what to do or pry into my past. He just stayed, silent and calm. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt seen. Not as a beggar, not as a nameless face in the crowd, not as another lost soul on the streets, but as a human being. When he finally left, he took nothing from me, only the weight of my loneliness. For the first time in years, I felt a little stronger. His small act of kindness was like a tiny flame in the darkness, a reminder that maybe the world wasn't all bad. Maybe, just maybe, there were still good people out there. But hope was fragile. The streets were still cold, and life was still cruel. Each day was a battle, and I had no choice but to keep fighting. Hunger gnawed at my insides, and exhaustion clung to my limbs like heavy chains. I wandered the streets with Buddy, my only companion. His thin frame and dull fur showed the same struggles I carried. But he never left my side, and I never left his. One morning, I woke up feeling weaker than usual. My head was heavy, my vision blurred. I tried to sit up, but my legs shook beneath me, and I fell back onto the hard concrete. Buddy whined softly, nudging my hand with his nose as if he could sense something was wrong. "I'm okay, Buddy. Don't worry," I mumbled, but I wasn't okay. That day, the streets were busy with people rushing past, their faces indifferent. I tried to call out, but my voice was too faint. I felt invisible, like I didn't exist. My body ached, my fingers numb from the biting wind. I pulled my tattered coat tighter around myself, but it did little against the cold. Buddy stayed close, licking my hand as if he could warm me with his presence. He was the only one who cared. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the chill deepened, settling into my bones. I shivered violently, my body too weak to fight against it. My mind drifted to memories of warmth, of my mother. I remembered sitting on her lap as a child, her arms wrapped around me, safe and secure. Her voice was soft, soothing. "Be strong, my son," she would say. But how could I be strong when I felt so alone? That night, I dreamed of her. She was standing in a golden field, smiling, her arms open wide. "Come to me," she called. I ran to her, desperate to feel her embrace again, but just as I reached her, she disappeared. I woke up with tears in my eyes, clutching at the emptiness where she had been. The dream had felt so real, but it was only a memory. The next morning, a kind woman stopped in front of me. She had warm eyes and a gentle smile. "Are you okay?" she asked, kneeling beside me. I wanted to tell her everything: the hunger, the pain, the loneliness, but I didn't know where to start. So I just shook my head. Without hesitation, she took off the blanket she had wrapped around herself and placed it over my shoulders. Then she handed me a piece of bread. "Take care of yourself," she said softly before walking away. For a moment, the warmth of her kindness filled the empty space inside me. It reminded me of my mother, of what love once felt like. But as the day went on, the world grew loud again. The streets swallowed me whole, and the feeling faded. I was just another face in the crowd once more. Life on the streets was a cruel balance of fleeting moments of hope and endless hours of struggle. Every act of kindness gave me strength, but the hardships always returned, relentless and unyielding. Still, I kept going. I had to. "You've made it this far," I whispered to myself. "Don't give up now." One evening, the sky darkened with heavy rain. The cold drops fell relentlessly, soaking through my clothes. Buddy and I huddled under a small overhang, trying to stay dry. The streets were empty, the only sound the steady rhythm of rain against the pavement. I held Buddy close, pressing my face into his damp fur. "We'll get through this, Buddy. Just hold on." As I sat there, I thought about my life. So many years, spent fighting, surviving, barely holding on. Would things ever change? I thought about the dreams I once had as a child, the hope of a better future. They felt so far away now. Then, footsteps. A young man in a black coat stood before me, holding an umbrella. His eyes were kind, filled with something I had seen so little of: compassion. "Are you all right, sir?" he asked, crouching beside me. I didn't know how to answer. How could I put my suffering into words? He glanced at Buddy and smiled. "You have a loyal friend." I nodded. "He's all I have." The man sat down next to me, shielding us both with his umbrella. He told me his story, how he had once been homeless too. "Someone helped me when I had nothing," he said. "Now I want to help you." He handed me a small card. "This is a shelter nearby. They can give you food, a place to sleep. You don't have to be alone anymore." I stared at the card in my hand, my fingers tightening around it. It felt like something solid, something real. Hope. As he stood to leave, he looked at me one last time and said, "You deserve a second chance." I watched him walk away, the rain still falling around me. Then I looked at Buddy and smiled. "Maybe things can change," I whispered. The streets were still dark, the rain still cold. But somehow it didn't feel as heavy anymore. I stood up, gripping the card, and took a step forward. Buddy wagged his tail and followed. For the first time in a long time, I walked toward something instead of away. Together we left the darkness behind, hoping for a better tomorrow.